The enigmatic reign of Pharaoh Khety III, a tale of power, perseverance, and shadows. A pharaoh lost to time, but not to history. Picture the vast expanse of the Egyptian desert, where the sun blazes down with relentless intensity, casting long shadows across the endless sea of golden sands. The Nile River, the lifeblood of an ancient civilization, wins its way through this harsh landscape, nourishing the land and the people who have thrived along its banks for millennia. This is the backdrop of a time when Egypt was not the unified, glorious empire we often envision, but a land torn apart by internal strife and uncertainty. It was an era of broken dreams and fractured power, where even the divine authority of the pharaohs was questioned and contested. In this tumultuous period, known as the First Intermediate Period, a figure emerges from the shadows, a ruler whose name has been all but forgotten by history, yet whose story is a haunting reminder of the impermanence of power. This is the story of Pharaoh Khety III of the 10th dynasty, a king who reigned in a time of darkness, when the future of Egypt hung in the balance. His name may not be as familiar as that of Ramses II or Cleopatra, but his life and reign are no less captivating. For they offer us a glimpse into a world where the stakes were high, the challenges immense, and the outcomes far from certain. Khety III's reign is a tale of survival, of a ruler who faced overwhelming odds and fought to maintain his kingdom's place in a world that was rapidly slipping away. It is a story that invites us to ponder the fragility of power, the resilience of the human spirit, and the mysteries that lie buried beneath the sands of time. As we embark on this journey into the past, let us uncover the layers of history that have obscured the legacy of a pharaoh who, though nearly forgotten, played a crucial role in one of Egypt's most turbulent chapters. The 10th dynasty, a kingdom divided and a land in turmoil. To truly understand the significance of Khety III's reign, we must first explore the broader context of the 10th dynasty, a period that was as complex as it was chaotic. The Old Kingdom, often celebrated as the Age of the Pyramids, had crumbled nearly 2 centuries before Khety III's time, leaving Egypt fractured into a patchwork of competing factions, each vying for control over the once unified land. This era, spanning from approximately 2160 to 2040 before the Common Era, is known as the First Intermediate Period, a time when the mighty institutions of the past had collapsed and the future seemed uncertain. The 10th dynasty was one of the major players in this fragmented landscape, a dynasty that claimed authority over Middle Egypt from its capital in Heracleopolis. Heracleopolis, a city whose name might not evoke the same grandeur as Memphis or Thebes, was nevertheless a crucial center of power during this period. It was here that the rulers of the 10th dynasty, including Khety III, sought to reassert their authority over a divided nation and restore the stability that had once defined the Egyptian state. However, the 10th dynasty was not without its challenges. To the south, in Thebes, a rival faction, the 11th dynasty, was rising in power, determined to reunify Egypt under its rule. The Theban rulers, particularly Mentuhotep II, harbored ambitions that threatened the very existence of the Heracleopolitan kings. The stage was set for a prolonged and bitter struggle, a war not just for territory, but for the soul of Egypt itself. Amidst this backdrop of political intrigue and military conflict, Khety III ascended to the throne of Heracleopolis, likely around 2060 before the Common Era. His reign was marked by the declining power of his dynasty, the growing threat from Thebes, and the constant pressure to maintain control over a kingdom that was slowly slipping through his fingers. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Khety III was a ruler who refused to back down, a king who would fight to the bitter end to protect his people and his legacy. Khety III, the man behind the throne and the myth. Who was Khety III? This is a question that has puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. Unlike the more famous pharaohs whose names are etched into the annals of history, Khety III remains a shadowy figure, his life and character obscured by the passage of time. Yet, it is in this very obscurity that the allure of his story lies, for it allows us to imagine, to speculate, and to fill in the gaps with our own interpretations of who this enigmatic ruler might have been. Born into the royal family of Heracleopolis, Khety III would have been raised in a world steeped in the traditions of the pharaohs. From a young age, he would have been groomed for kingship, taught the rituals and responsibilities that came with being the living embodiment of the divine on earth. He would have learned the art of diplomacy, the strategies of war, and the importance of upholding Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian concept of order, justice, and balance that was believed to be essential for the survival of the cosmos itself. As a young prince, Khety III might have gazed in awe at the statues of his ancestors, the mighty pharaohs who had built Egypt into the most powerful civilization of the ancient world. He would have been told tales of their conquests, their achievements, and their divine favor, and he would have been reminded that it was his destiny to continue their legacy. Yet, as he grew older, Khety III would have also become acutely aware of the fragility of that legacy, of the dangers that lurked both within and beyond the borders of his kingdom. By the time Khety III ascended to the throne, he was likely a man of considerable experience, having witnessed firsthand the challenges that his predecessors had faced. The kingdom he inherited was not the glorious, unified Egypt of old, but a fractured realm beset by internal divisions and external threats. The golden age of the pyramids was a distant memory, and the power of Heracleopolis was waning. Khety III would have known that his reign would be defined not by grand monuments or territorial expansion, but by the struggle to hold his kingdom together in the face of overwhelming odds. One can imagine Khety III standing in the great hall of his palace in Heracleopolis, surrounded by his advisors, priests, and generals. The walls would have been adorned with the images of the gods and the scenes of past victories, a constant reminder of the glory that once was. But the atmosphere would have been tense, the conversations laced with the underlying fear of what was to come. The Theban threat loomed large, and Khety III would have known that his kingdom's days were numbered unless he could find a way to turn the tide. The struggle for survival, Khety III military campaigns, and diplomatic gambits. Khety III was not a man to sit idly by as his kingdom crumbled around him. He understood that the survival of Heracleopolis depended on his ability to act decisively, to engage in both military and diplomatic efforts to secure his realm. Though the records of his reign are fragmentary, we can piece together a picture of a ruler who was both a warrior and a strategist, a king who fought on multiple fronts to preserve his kingdom's independence. The battles between Heracleopolis and Thebes were fierce and unforgiving, fought in the unforgiving terrain of the Nile Valley. The armies of Khety III, though loyal and determined, were often outmatched by the larger and more organized forces of Mentuhotep II. Yet, Khety III was a master of defensive warfare, using the natural features of the land to his advantage, building fortifications, and employing hit-and-run tactics to harry the Theban forces. One can almost hear the sounds of battle, the clash of swords, the shouts of soldiers, the thundering of chariots across the desert sands. The Nile, usually a symbol of life and fertility, would have run red with the blood of those who fought and died in the name of their kings. Khety III, clad in his royal armor, would have led his troops from the front, a warrior king who was not afraid to risk his life for his people. But Khety III's efforts were not limited to the battlefield. He was also a shrewd diplomat, aware that military might alone would not be enough to secure his kingdom's future. It is likely that he engaged in negotiations with other regional powers, seeking alliances that could bolster his position against the Theban threat. Perhaps he reached out to the rulers of the Delta region, or to the nomadic tribes of the desert, offering them incentives to join his cause. These diplomatic gambits, though ultimately unsuccessful, reveal a ruler who was willing to explore every possible avenue to save his kingdom. There is also the possibility that Khety III attempted to negotiate directly with Mentuhotep II, offering terms of peace that would allow Heracleopolis to retain some measure of autonomy. Such negotiations would have been fraught with tension, with both sides wary of the other's intentions. Imagine the scene, a tense meeting between the envoys of Khety III and Mentuhotep II, held in a neutral location along the Nile. The air would have been thick with the scent of incense and the hum of cicadas, as the two sides discussed the fate of Egypt in hushed tones. Yet, despite Khety III's best efforts, the tide was turning against him. The forces of Thebes were relentless, driven by a vision of a united Egypt under Theban rule. Mentuhotep II, a leader of great ambition and determination, was not content with half measures. He sought complete domination, and he was willing to go to any lengths to achieve it. The battles between Heracleopolis and Thebes became increasingly desperate, as Khety III forces were gradually pushed back, and the once mighty kingdom of Heracleopolis began to crumble. A pharaoh's legacy, building for eternity in a time of decline. Even as Khety III waged war and sought alliances, he would have been acutely aware of the need to secure his legacy. In ancient Egypt, the concept of immortality was deeply intertwined with the idea of legacy. Pharaohs were not just rulers of the living, but also of the dead, and their actions on earth were believed to have eternal consequences. Khety III, like all pharaohs, would have been driven by the desire to ensure that his name would be remembered, that his soul would find eternal peace in the afterlife. In pursuit of this goal, Khety III likely commissioned the construction of various monuments, temples, and tombs, structures that would stand as a testament to his reign long after his death. Though few of these structures have survived to the present day, we can imagine what they might have been like, based on the remains of similar projects from that era. Heracleopolis, the capital of the 10th dynasty, would have been a city bustling with activity, its streets filled with craftsmen, laborers, and priests, all working to fulfill the pharaoh's vision. The temples of Heracleopolis would have been expanded and embellished, with new statues of the gods, elaborate carvings, and rich offerings presented in honor of the city's divine protectors. These temples were not just places of worship, they were centers of political and economic power, symbols of the pharaoh's authority and his connection to the divine. Khety III's tomb would have been the crowning achievement of his reign, a structure designed to ensure his safe passage to the afterlife and to immortalize his name for all eternity. Constructed in a secluded location, possibly in the desert hills outside Heracleopolis, the tomb would have been a massive undertaking, requiring the labor of hundreds, if not thousands, of workers. The walls of the tomb would have been covered with intricate reliefs, depicting scenes of Khety III's life, his victories in battle, his offerings to the gods, and his journey through the underworld. Imagine the scene within the tomb, the flickering light of oil lamps casting eerie shadows on the walls, as artisans painstakingly chisel the pharaoh's achievements into the stone. The air would have been thick with the smell of incense, the sounds of chanting priests echoing through the chambers as they performed the rituals necessary to prepare the tomb for its eternal occupant. The tomb itself would have been filled with treasures, gold, jewels, fine linens, and food, all intended to provide for Khety III in the afterlife. Yet, even as Khety III worked to secure his legacy, he would have known that his kingdom was in peril. The walls of his tomb, no matter how grand, could not shield him from the realities of the world outside. The decline of Heracleopolis was inevitable, and Khety III's reign would be remembered not for its triumphs, but for its desperate struggle against the forces of history. The end of an era, the fall of Heracleopolis and the twilight of the 10th dynasty. The final chapter of Khety III's story is a tragic one, a tale of a kingdom that fought valiantly against the tides of change, but ultimately succumbed to the forces arrayed against it. The Theban ruler Mentuhotep II, driven by his vision of a reunified Egypt, continued his relentless campaign against Heracleopolis, eventually succeeding in defeating the forces of Khety III and bringing an end to the 10th dynasty. The fall of Heracleopolis marked the end of an era, not just for Khety III, but for all of Egypt. The city, once a center of power and culture, was reduced to a provincial town, overshadowed by the rising power of Thebes. Khety III, who had fought so hard to protect his kingdom, was now a king without a throne, a ruler whose legacy would be largely forgotten in the annals of history. Yet, even in defeat, there is something noble about Khety III's story. His reign, though marked by struggle and loss, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Khety III refused to surrender, even when the odds were stacked against him, and in doing so, he left behind a legacy that, though obscured by time, continues to resonate with those who seek to understand the complexities of Egypt's past. Speculations and anecdotes. The pharaoh who defied fate and embraced the unknown. As with many figures from ancient history, much of what we know about Khety III is based on fragments, on incomplete records, and the interpretations of later historians. This leaves us with a tantalizing array of possibilities, a canvas on which we can paint our own visions of who this enigmatic pharaoh might have been. One intriguing possibility is that Khety III was not just a ruler, but also a visionary, a king who, despite the challenges he faced, sought to chart a new course for his kingdom. Perhaps he was a man of deep faith, who believed that his struggles were part of a divine plan, that his efforts to maintain Ma'at were not just for the benefit of his people, but for the very fabric of the universe. This would have given Khety III a sense of purpose, a belief that his actions, no matter how difficult, were necessary to preserve the cosmic order. There is also the question of Khety III's personal life, a topic that remains largely unexplored in the historical record. Who were the people closest to him? Did he have a trusted advisor, a confidant with whom he shared his deepest fears and hopes? Was there a queen by his side, a woman who provided support and guidance during the most trying times of his reign? These personal details, though lost to history, add a layer of depth to Khety III's story, reminding us that he was not just a king, but a man with a life full of relationships, emotions, and struggles. Another speculation revolves around the possibility that Khety III, in his final days, may have foreseen the fall of his kingdom. As the walls of Heracleopolis were breached and the Theban forces closed in, did Khety III stand atop the ramparts of his city, gazing out at the approaching enemy with a mix of defiance and resignation? Did he make peace with his fate, knowing that he had done everything in his power to protect his kingdom? Or did he harbor a lingering hope that some miracle might yet save him? These questions, though unanswerable, invite us to imagine the final moments of a king who, even in the face of defeat, remained steadfast in his resolve. Conclusion: the legacy of Khety III and the lessons of history. In the grand narrative of ancient Egypt, Khety III seemed like a minor figure, ruler whose reign was eclipsed by the more famous kings and queens who came before and after him. Yet, his story is a vital thread in the tapestry of Egypt's history, a tale that reminds us of the complexities and challenges that defined the first intermediate period. Khety III's reign is a story of struggle, of a king who faced overwhelming odds and fought to maintain his kingdom's place in a world that was rapidly changing. As we reflect on the life and times of Khety III, we are reminded that history is not just about the triumphs and achievements of great rulers, but also about the struggles and failures of those who fought to preserve what they believed in. Khety III's legacy, though largely forgotten, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the courage of those who stand against the tide, even when defeat seems inevitable. In the end, Khety III's story is not just the tale of a pharaoh who reigned during a turbulent time. It is a story of a man who, despite the challenges he faced, sought to uphold the legacy of his ancestors, to protect his people, and to ensure that his name would be remembered. And in that, he succeeded. His legacy, though fragmented and incomplete, continues to intrigue and inspire those who seek to uncover the mysteries of Egypt's past. As we look back on the life of Khety III, we are reminded that even the most obscure figures in history have a story worth telling, a story that can teach us about the enduring power of resilience, determination, and the human spirit.